Hello everybody. Thank you for watching as always. This is an overdue one, and somebody had requested I do a solo Beatles release on George Harrison's 1979 self-titled album. I haven't done it, but I'm doing it now. What do I think of this album? I think it's a great album. I don't have too many bad things to say about this album. I think George finally had a love of making music again. And it started with the previous album, 33 1/3. He was finally freed from Apple. The Beatles signed the dissolution paperwork, so he was done. No longer had to rely on his past. He was done. He got over the critical shellacking that he got for Dark Horse and the 1974 tour. Extra Texture, the last album on Apple, I actually think it's a good album. I stated in an earlier video that I like the album. I'm probably one of the few people that thinks You is a great tune. But I do think Extra Texture needed to be edited. Some of the songs just needed to be edited. There was too much extra fat. It needed to be trimmed. The meat needed to be lean and tender. So when he started his own label with Dark Horse, 33 1/3, he's rejuvenated. He's back. Tom Scott on great sax, great musicians, and here he is. This album is just such a positive album, and that's what I like about it. It's got a positive vibe to it. Great song. The album opens with Love Comes to Everyone, which is probably one of my favorite George tunes. It's definitely one of my favorite George tunes, and one that doesn't get celebrated that much. That's why I was happy that Eric Clapton did a cover version of it. A pretty faithful cover version of it, actually. And on this album, you get Not Guilty. Finally get an official released version of Not Guilty. Totally different from the version that the Beatles were attempting on the White Album. And this one is, gentle, smooth, acoustic guitar. George had this sort of L.A. Steely Dan-esque quality during this period. You heard it on 33 1/3. The term yacht rock is out there nowadays, and I kind of think it's got a yacht rock vibe, and I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean that in a really good sense. It's a gentle version. It's less angry, which kind of shows that he mellowed during that time and probably made peace with his past there. And then you get a beautiful, fun sequel to Here Comes the Sun with Here Comes the Moon, the Moon, the Moon, the Moon. Beautiful tune. Another song that I love, Blow Away. You can't go wrong with that tune. The musicians on this album, I mean, who do you have playing with him on this record? You got Steve Winwood on keyboards and synthesizers. You got Andy Newmark on drums. You have one of the greatest bass players of all time in Willie Weeks. Eric Clapton stops by to give a guitar intro on Love Comes to Everyone. You have Gary Wright on keyboards. Del Newman on strings, who did a lot with string arrangements, who did a lot with Elton John. So I really love this album. It's a low-key album, but I think it was the last great George Harrison album, and I'm sorry, I think it was the last great George Harrison album until Cloud 9. I'm not really a big fan of Somewhere in England. I'm not really a fan of Gone Troppo, except for the song Dream Away. So it was like he really felt rejuvenated with 33 1/3 and this album. But by the time he got to Somewhere in England, and I think a lot of what suffers on Somewhere in England is the fact that the label made him redo the song order and do some re-recording. They rejected his original running order. So I think that's where a lot of the attitude came in. And Gone Troppo was like, I got to get an album out. Here you go. Here's the album. But not so on George Harrison, the self-titled album. It's self-titled. It's almost like he's back. This album is me. This album is truly me. I mean, it's just a bunch of great tunes. Dark Sweet Lady, Faster. We all know George loves Formula One racing, or he loved Formula One racing. And I think that song is a tribute to the drivers of Formula One. And it's a beautiful tribute. And I always encourage people to listen to the opening of that with headphones, the live recording of the Grand Prix and the drivers taking off. Brilliant opening. Get some headphones on with that thing. It really works. And crank it up. Definitely crank that up. George Harrison's self-titled 1979 album. I love it. I think it's a great album. I think it was George being excited again and being positive, in a positive frame of mind. Definitely, if you haven't heard it, check it out. If you know the album, it's a treat to listen to every time. That's my simple take on a very simple album. George Harrison's 1979 self-titled album. Please click subscribe, spread the word about my channel, hit that bell notification if you like what you see here, and I'll definitely be talking to you soon.